What did medieval people really do when they couldn't sleep? Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of those questions that seems small at first, but the moment you think about it too long, you realize actually it's a little weird. What did medieval people do when they couldn't sleep? Now, before you picture some knight in shining armor tossing and turning in his feather bed, slow down. Most people in the Middle Ages did not have feather beds. In fact, if you were a peasant, your bed might be a sack of straw or just some itchy old hay on the floor. Cozy, right? Perfect for insomnia? So let's set the stage. Imagine it's year 1340. You're lying in a dark, smoky cottage. Your entire family, plus maybe a goat or two, are in the same single room. The fire is burned down to embers. There are no glowing iPhones to scroll through, no white noise apps, no late-night TV to binge. You're just stuck there, staring into the void, listening to your cut.
One of the weirdest things about medieval sleep is that it wasn't supposed to be one long stretch. Nope. For a lot of people, the normal pattern was something historians now called segmented sleep. Basically, you'd go to bed when it got dark, because candles were expensive and, frankly, dangerous, and then you'd sleep for a few hours. Sometime around midnight or so, you'd just wake up on purpose, not tossing and turning, not freaking out about being awake, just casually awake. This was known as the first sleep. Then you'd have a period of wakefulness, sometimes lasting an hour or two. After that, you'd go back down for your second sleep, which carried you into dawn. Imagine if today we all bragged about our two-sleep lifestyle. You'd see wellness influencers online posting stuff like, "Just woke up from my first sleep, feeling so aligned, about to pray, journal, and..."
So what did people actually do in the middle of the night? Well, the obvious one was prayer. Medieval Europe was absolutely soaked in religion, and if you found yourself awake at 1 a.m., you were basically in prime time for whispered prayers. Some monks even built their entire schedules around getting up for nighttime prayer services, called matins.
But you didn't have to be a monk to get in on the midnight prayer vibe. Ordinary people might quietly say the Lord's Prayer, or whisper a little chant against demons, because of course everyone was convinced that the dark was crawling with evil spirits. Naturally, nothing says soothing bedtime ritual like the possibility of a demon sitting on your chest.
But let's be honest, most people weren't spending every midnight in a state of holy ecstasy. A lot of them were doing more practical things. You might poke at the fire, making sure it didn't completely go out. You might get up to use the chamber pot. Definitely the least glamorous medieval activity. But hey, bladder control waits for no one. Some people would even wander outside. Yes, outside. Imagine it's pitch black, no street lights, no glow from cities, just the stars and maybe the moon. If you're up in the middle of the night, you might slip out to check on the animals or make sure nobody's stealing your stuff. And of course, there's the other classic midnight activity, sex. Yeah, people have been sneaking in late-night action forever. In fact, some medical writers of the time actually recommended the period between first and second sleep as the ideal time to, make heirs. Because apparently, nothing sets the mood like a smoky hut and the smell of livestock. Here's the part that might surprise you. Medieval people didn't really freak out about being awake at night. In our world, insomnia is something you Google frantically at 3 a.m. while chugging melatonin tea. But back then, it wasn't treated like a problem. It was just part of the rhythm. There's even evidence in medical text from the time that being awake at night was normal enough to get little recommendations. Like, if you're up, don't eat too much heavy food. Maybe sip some warm wine. Yes, warm wine, because apparently they wanted you drunk and drowsy. Honestly. Now let's talk about what people were actually sleeping on, because this affects your chances of a good night's rest. If you are rich, congratulations. You got to sleep in a bed with a mattress stuffed with feathers, curtains around it to keep out drafts, and maybe even a little step stool to climb in. Medieval people did have some tricks for sleep. Herbal remedies were big. Valerian root,
chamomile, lavender. These were all recommended for calming the body. Some of them actually work. Others were more questionable. For example, one medieval tip for better sleep was to eat a roasted dormouse before bed. Yes, a mouse. Don't ask me why. Maybe the logic was, if you're sleepy enough to eat a mouse, you're sleepy enough to pass out afterward. Another suggestion was rubbing your temples with poppy juice mixed with goat's milk. Sounds soothing, right? Until you realize poppy juice basically means opium. So yes, they were self-medicating with medieval Ambien. We also need to keep in mind that medieval nights were scary. Darkness wasn't just an inconvenience. It was full of anxieties. Thieves, animals, demons. People thought the night was literally dangerous. That's one reason why having a segmented sleep made sense. If you wake up for a couple hours in the dead of night, you're alert enough to make sure nothing terrible is happening. Kind of like a built-in night watch system. Of course, it also meant your insomnia hours weren't exactly peaceful. Imagine lying awake, staring at the rafters and wondering if there's a witch outside trying to curse you. Definitely not the most relaxed.